Hello and welcome to Comic Book Herald's explanation and background of Heroes in Crisis, the 2018-2019 DC Comics event written by Tom King with art primarily by Clay Mann. Today I'll be going into background for getting into Heroes in Crisis comics, what the comic book story is about, and a foundation for understanding what the heck is going on with the characters and the universe and the places around this story, so that if you haven't, for example, been following along with every aspect of DC Rebirth leading up to this, you can in fact jump into Heroes in Crisis and have at least the knowledge to understand what's going on with some of these characters and places. So, what is it? Heroes in Crisis is a 9-issue event series with the solicited premise around a place called Sanctuary. That is a center in the DC universe where heroes and powered individuals go to deal with some of the trauma that comes with their lives. Much of the event's context is actually tied up in the real-world backstory of author Tom King, a former CIA analyst who served in 2 American wars during the 2000s. King is on record as someone who has experienced the sudden onset of a panic attack and has a unique background when it comes to exploring PTSD and anxiety, which is what Heroes in Crisis aims to achieve. In terms of in-universe context, the build to Heroes in Crisis has primarily come from references to Sanctuary, a rehab center for superpowered individuals. The center has been referenced in King's own work, most notably in 2 3-part Batman stories. You had Everyone Loves Ivy in Batman number 41 to number 43, as well as The Gift in Batman number 45 to 47. I will give some non-spoiler background on these stories as I progress. Likewise, Sanctuary has been mentioned briefly in the pages of both Red Hood and the Outlaws, Annual number 2 and Flash number 51, with both Roy Harper, aka Arsenal, and Wally West, aka Flash, checking themselves in at the end of their respective story arcs. Somewhat intriguingly, Sanctuary has also been mentioned in the ongoing Doomsday Clock maxi series written by Jeff Johns and Gary Frank, although I expect, at least at this early stage, that is less of a necessary prelude tie-in and more of a perhaps interesting after-the-fact tie-in once we have some more information about what Heroes in Crisis is actually containing. It does seem relevant to mention early on that this is officially the first crisis of DC Rebirth. And the reason I mention that is that crisis is a very particular word. It's a particularly loaded language in the DC universe. It's not something the publisher has toyed with unless they were telling a story with major ramifications on the DCU as a whole. So although events like Flashpoint or Dark Knight's Metal, which came in 2017, have crisis-like qualities to them, they are not officially titled as such. In fact, the last actual crisis title in DC's catalog came in 2009 with Final Crisis, which was written by Grant Morrison. So, for those of you who are unfamiliar sort of with the DC Crisis history, you had in the mid-80s Crisis on Infinite Earths kicking off the genre, and of course this is one of the biggest stories in DC's history, and it really deals with the merging and of the multiverse and blending basically DC's multiple decades long continuity together in a way that tries to make sense of how these characters that were around in the 40s could be operating in the 80s as well, and how there could be doubles and all these timelines, and it's really a continuity shuffle that then gets in this giant cosmic epic 12-issue story. You then had in the early 90s 0 Hour, A Crisis in Time. There was a pretty big break there for about a decade until 2004 when we had Identity Crisis, written by Brad Meltzer and with art by Rags Morales. We'll talk a little bit more about that because Identity Crisis is, for all intents and purposes, the quote-unquote crisis that Heroes in Crisis is going to be most frequently compared to, and I'll touch on why that is. You had in the mid-2000s Infinite Crisis, and then, as I mentioned, in 2009 Final Crisis. So here we are in 2018, and Heroes in Crisis is locked and loaded and ready to go with DC's newest, again, post-DC Rebirth era crisis. So that's the context for what this issue is about in very broad terms.